Dara Voss entered from a guest corridor alone. No aide, no escort. She carried her document case and walked to the representative seat at the far end of the curved table with the same unhurried pace she had used in the docking corridor. She set her case down, sat and waited. Robin opened the session with the standard greeting and the formal statement of purpose. He recited the 14 coordinates in the outer expansion belt. He cited the common space accords. He used the word incursion. After all, the scholars had argued it was more precise. Dara listened to all of it. She did not interrupt. She did not lean forward or back. She simply listened with an expression that was polite and entirely attentive. And when Robin finished and asked if the Commonwealth had a response, she put her hands together on the table and said, "I have a few questions, if that's acceptable." "Of course," Robin said. "The Common Space Accords of 2271, she said. "Which version are you citing? The original, the 2281 revision, or the 2299 amendment?" Robin looked at his scholar, who quietly said, "The original." "I see," Dara said. "And do you have a record of which species were present at the drafting session in 2271? The scholar produced the list. It had 9 species on it. Humans were not among them. Humanity had not achieved FTL travel in 2271, Dara said simply. We were not a spacefaring species. We were not at that table, and we were not notified of the accords at any point prior to this summons. She paused. I want to be clear. I am not saying this to be argumentative. I am saying it because it is relevant to the question of whether Earth is in violation of a treaty it was never party to. The room was quiet. Counselor Haight, the red-shelled mercantile delegate, shifted in his seat. There are provisions for new spacefaring species to be inducted into existing accords. There are, Dara agreed. We will be glad to discuss those provisions. We were not aware they applied to us because no one contacted Earth about them. We assumed the outer belt was unclaimed space. Our survey data showed no settlement, no active claim markers, no boundary beacons. She opened her document case and placed a data pad on the table. I brought our survey records if the council would like to review them. Nobody reached for the pad immediately. Saul asked the question that had been sitting in the back of the chamber since the morning. Ambassador Voss, why did Earth send a warship? Dara looked at Saul with a mild expression. The Enduring Resolve is my assigned diplomatic escort. Under Commonwealth Code of Delegation, Class 1 ambassadors travel with full naval escort. Is standard protocol. A vessel of that size, Saul said, is standard protocol. Is the assigned vessel, yes? She tilted her head slightly. I want to be very clear that the Resolve's presence is not intended as pressure or as a demonstration. She is here because I am here, and I am here because the council asked me to come. If the size of my escort is causing discomfort, I apologize. I can note it in my report and suggest a different protocol for future visits. The apology was genuine. That somehow made it worse. Robin picked up the weapons manifest. He had promised himself he would be direct. We received your vessel's weapons broadcast this morning. Standard transparency protocol, your officer explained. Yes, Dara said. I want to ask you about it directly. Of course. Robin looked at the first line. Primary armament. 16 long-range mass accelerator batteries, each rated 4. He stopped. What does planetary surface saturation mean? Dara was quiet for a moment. It means the battery is rated to cover a large surface area with sustained fire. It is an old design feature. Most of those batteries have never been fired in combat. She met his eyes. The Resolve is 31 years old, Counselor. She was built for the worst scenario we could imagine at the time. That scenario has not occurred. But you built for it anyway, Haight said. Yes, Dara said. Why? She considered the question as if it deserved real thought. Because where we come from, she said finally, is better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. That is a very old human idea. It applies to medicine, to infrastructure, to emergency systems. She paused. And to ships. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Robin set the manifest down. He had been in politics for 40 years. He had met aggressive species, proud species, territorial species that used silence as a weapon and generosity as a trap. He had never met a species that listed its weapons openly, apologized for the size of its escort, asked polite questions about treaty history, and still somehow left every person in the room feeling that the ground beneath them was not quite as solid as it had been before they walked in. In continuous deployment. She kept reading. The Resolve was not, the document noted, the largest vessel currently in the Titan-class fleet. That distinction belonged to the UHCS absolute threshold, completed 9 years ago, which ran to 6.2 kilometers in length and carried a crew of 15,000. The document described the threshold in a single dry paragraph and moved on, as if a 6-kilometer warship was a minor administrative detail. There were 9 Titan-class vessels total, as the white paper had stated. 3 were currently on deep exploration deployment in the Outer Arm. 2 were assigned to border patrol routes. 1 was in scheduled maintenance. The Enduring Resolve was listed as diplomatic escort duty, apparently a real assignment category in the Commonwealth Navy, with its own protocols and procedures. Ciara looked at that entry for a long time. A warship the size of a small city, assigned full-time to carrying diplomats. She walked back into the side room, where Robin was waiting, and set her data pad on the table in front of him. She had highlighted the key figures in yellow, because she thought that might help. It did not seem to help. Robin read the crew complement. He read the fabrication bay capacity. He read the length of continuous deployment without external resupply. He looked at Ciara. "How many ships total?" he asked, meaning all human naval vessels, not just Titan class. Ciara pulled that number from the defense document summary table and pointed to it. Robin looked at it for several seconds without speaking. "They publish this," he said. "Not a question." "Yes," Ciara said. "Is freely available. They have been broadcasting it for years." Why would they publish their military fleet numbers? Ciara had thought about this during the 11 minutes she had waited for the document to arrive. "I think," she said carefully, "it's because they want people to know. Not as a provocation, as an answer to a question they expect people to ask. They are saying, here is what we have, so that you do not have to wonder, and so that you make your decisions accordingly." She paused. "They are not hiding it, because they do not think they need to. The hiding would be the threat. Showing it openly is," she searched for the word, "it is confidence." Robin stood up. He straightened his robe. He picked up the datapad and took it with him back to the chamber. He did not put it face down on the table this time. When the other counselors returned and saw his expression, several of them reached for their own datapads, suddenly wanting to read things they had not thought to read before. Ambassador Voss was already in her seat, waiting, with the same patient expression she had worn all afternoon. Robin looked at her across the table and thought about the word confidence and what it looked like when it was real. Then he opened the session. Robin did not open with the treaty this time. He opened with a question. "Ambassador Voss," he said, "I would like to ask you something that is not on the formal agenda, if you will permit." Dara nodded once. "Of course. Your survey ships found the outer expansion belt and found it empty. No beacons, no claims, no settlement. You moved in." He leaned forward slightly. "Did it not occur to anyone on Earth that the absence of settlement does not mean absence of intent?" The question was genuine. He wanted to understand. Dara thought about it for a moment, not performing thought, actually doing it. "Yes," she said. "That conversation happened. There are people in our government who raised exactly that concern." She paused, but the counterargument was also raised. Empty space, with no markers and no communication, leaves a species with a choice. Wait indefinitely for permission that may never come. Or move and be willing to negotiate when someone objects. She looked at him. "You objected. We came. Here we are." "Here we are," Robin said. He glanced at the data pad in front of him, the fleet numbers still visible, and made a decision. "The formal accusations on the agenda are, I think, less productive than they were this morning," he said. "The legal question of treaty applicability is real and will need to be resolved, but will not be resolved today. What I would like to propose, with the Council's agreement," he looked at his colleagues briefly, "is that we set aside the accusation framework and discuss what a workable arrangement looks like going forward." Haight spoke before Robin had finished. "I want to hear the Commonwealth's proposal first." Dara accepted this without hesitation. She opened her document case and placed a single-page summary on the table. The Commonwealth proposes a joint boundary commission. One representative from each participating species, co-chaired by a human delegate and a council-appointed delegate. The commission would spend 12 months surveying the outer belt, documenting all existing interests and intent claims, and drafting an expansion framework that all parties would sign. Not one drafted without us. One drafted with us. She paused to let that land. "We are not asking for everything in the belt," she continued. "We are asking for fair terms that account for the fact that Earth arrived late to a galaxy that was already being quietly divided without our knowledge. We are willing to acknowledge claims we did not know existed, provided those claims are documented and transparent. We are willing to accept limits on our expansion rate, provided those limits apply equally to all species and are not designed simply to keep us contained. She looked around the table evenly. We want room. We are willing to earn it fairly. The chamber was quiet for a moment. Then Haight said, and if the council determines that certain zones should be off limits, full stop, no commission, no negotiation, simply this area is closed? Dara looked at him. On what legal basis? Council authority, Haight said. We are not council members, Dara said. You cannot legislate our behavior through an institution we do not belong to. You can ask. You can negotiate. You can make the case that a zone should be off limits, and we may well agree. But not because the council decided it without us. Haight was quiet. Then he said, and if we sent ships to enforce it? The chamber went very still. Dara Voss did not raise her voice. She did not change her posture. She looked at Haight with an expression that was not hostile and not cold, and somehow harder than either. Then Earth would regret the loss of what could have been a straightforward working relationship, she said. And we would continue building. Building what? Haight asked. She did not answer. She did not need to. The fleet numbers were still on Robin's datapad, visible to anyone looking. Haight looked at them. He looked at Dara. He sat back in his chair. Counselor Ova, the quiet six-limbed delegate from the deep water worlds, who had not spoken once all session, said simply, I support the Joint Commission. 3 more counselors said the same thing, in quick succession. Robin called for a formal vote. The Commission proposal passed 11-0. No abstentions. Dara Voss noted the result in her document case, closed it neatly, and said, Thank you. We will have our nominee for co-chair to your office within 10 days. The session closed at 1847 station time. Haight left the chamber without speaking to anyone. Robin watched him go, and did not blame him. There was a particular kind of discomfort that came from realizing, mid-argument, that you were not holding the position of strength you thought you were, and it did not leave quickly. Robin stayed in his seat after the others filed out. He looked at the empty chair where Dara Voss had sat all afternoon. She had been polite throughout. Genuinely polite, not the kind that was a weapon. She had answered every question. She had offered a fair proposal. She had never raised her voice or made a threat. What she had done with quiet precision was make it clear that every path, except the reasonable one, led somewhere nobody wanted to go, and she had done it without ever needing to say so directly. That, Robin thought, was a very specific kind of skill. He was not sure whether to admire it or be unsettled by it. He picked up his datapad and went to find Seer. The station felt different the next morning, though nothing had changed. The lights were the same. The corridors were the same. The smell of recycled air and mineral filtration that every station had, that blend of metal and climate control that people who lived in space stopped noticing after a week, all of it exactly as it had been. But the staff moved a little differently, a little more aware of the window at the end of each corridor. The one that looked out toward the patch of stars, 200 kilometers away, where the enduring resolve sat and waited. Pell kept his sensor bay screen live all night. He told himself it was standard monitoring protocol. He ran a detailed passive scan every 30 minutes and logged each result in meticulous detail. He had also, somewhere around midnight, pulled up the Commonwealth's public naval channel and found that the Resolve was still broadcasting its standard transparency feed, real-time internal ship data, available to any receiver in range. Engine output, crew activity metrics, life support status across all 11 residential decks. He had not expected the life support data. 11 residential decks. He had tried to imagine 11,000 people living inside a single hull, and had eventually given up, the same way he gave up when trying to imagine numbers that had too many zeros. Dara Voss came through the docking corridor at 0900, returning to the shuttle. Her aide Finn was with her again, carrying the document cases. She stopped at the junction where Saul was waiting to see her off, and the two of them spoke briefly. Saul had prepared something to say. He had written it the night before. It was a formal farewell, structured and polished as council farewells were supposed to be, gracious, non-committal, with the right balance of warmth and professional distance. He did not use it. Instead, he said, Ambassador, I want to ask you something personal if you don't mind. Dara said she did not mind. Were you aware, Saul said, of the effect the Resolve's arrival had on the station? On the people here? Dara was quiet for a moment. I had a reasonable expectation, she said. And you brought her anyway. She was already coming, Dara said. Protocol assigns the escort, not the ambassador. I could have requested a smaller vessel. She paused. I chose not to. Saul's antennae moved slowly. Why? Dara looked at him with that same honest, attentive expression she had worn in the chamber. Because I was walking into a room where 11 governments intended to hold Earth responsible for a treaty we never signed. I wanted everyone in that room to make their decisions with accurate information. She picked up her document case. Not as a threat, as context. Saul thought about that for the rest of the day. Dara and Finn boarded the shuttle. The shuttle undocked at 0934 and made the 40-minute crossing back to the Resolve without incident. Pell tracked it automatically, noted the clean docking in his log, and then sat back and watched the Resolve's sensor silhouette on his screen. At 1100, the Resolve opened a brief channel to the station. Station Meridian, this is UHCS Enduring Resolve. We are preparing to depart. Thank you for your hospitality. Enduring Resolve out. That was the entire message. On Level 9, the observation deck had about 30 people on it by the time the Resolve's drives began to power up. They had gathered without anyone organizing it, staff from sensors, staff from the docking office, a few civilian contractors who worked in the maintenance base. Robin himself, standing near the back with his hands folded. Saul beside him. The drives took 4 minutes to reach full power. During those 4 minutes, even at 200 kilometers, the observation window began to pick up a faint light. Deep blue-white, steady, growing slowly brighter. The station's outer sensors registered a minor gravity gradient as the Resolve's mass displacement field shifted in preparation for FTL. Then she moved. Not fast at first, deliberately like a tide going out, slow and enormous and completely indifferent to the effort required. She crossed the inner system marker in 6 minutes and accelerated steadily the whole way. At the outer system boundary, she reached FTL threshold and jumped. The light vanished. The sensor screens showed empty space. Someone on the observation deck, Pell could not see who, let out a slow breath that was not quite a sound, but was almost one. Robin stayed at the window for a few minutes after everyone else had begun to drift away. He was looking at the place where the Resolve had been, which was now just ordinary stars. Saul came to stand beside him. She said it was context, Saul said, meaning the ambassador. Not a threat. Context. Yes, Robin said. Do you believe her? Robin thought about the session, the polite questions, the fair proposal, the quiet answer to Hate's demand that had ended the argument without being an argument. I believe, he said slowly, that she meant it exactly as she said it. And I believe that is the part we should be most thoughtful about. Saul considered that. Because the context itself is the message. Because the context itself is the message, Robin agreed. They stood there a moment longer. Then Robin turned and walked back toward the council offices where there was a joint commission to organize and a great deal of paperwork waiting for him. In the sensor bay, Pell added one final note to the departure log. Under remarks, he typed, "Vessel behaved with complete professionalism throughout. Recommend updating our classification standards. Current framework has no adequate category for what this was." He saved the log, leaned back in his chair, and looked at the empty screen for a long time.